Wednesday marked a day of questions for Chelsea supporters, with Abramovich announcing he would be selling the club, questions of where they go from here, and whether they'll be able to maintain their success with a new owner. But why has Abramovich decided to sell when he is such an enthusiastic owner? Hey, I'm Adrian, welcome to Rabona TV. Consider subscribing if you like the content, it's free. And for this one, I'll be joined by my friend Manuel Witt. Manuel's PhD thesis was called Selling the People's Game, the transition of professional football from communism to capitalism, which focused on how the football in the post-Soviet Union changed with the introduction of capitalism and how that affected football as a whole. He also taught history at one time as part of his PhD program. He's very well versed on Soviet history and politics, especially the intersection of politics, economics, and football. And he's part of the Unsackable podcast, of which I am a part of as well. So he's the perfect person to ask about all of this. We'll call upon him later in the video as he'll be a great help in this, as he always is. And finally, the last step before getting to the video is thanking our sponsors for this one. OneFootball. OneFootball is back on the channel as their app can help keep you up to date on all things in the football world. Get live breaking news about the teams, competitions, and players that you care about by following them through the app. On top of that, you can follow matches live with their match tickers, watch matches from the ISL, Swiss Super League, Brazil, the Danish Superliga, Austrian Bundesliga, and more, right in the app for free. Track transfers, watch highlights and other behind the scenes videos from your favorite clubs, and so much more. Use the link in the description or use this QR code to download OneFootball and help out Rabona TV in the process. All right, guys, let's get started. After taking over Chelsea in 2003, Roman Abramovich bankrolled the West London club to become a titan, not only within England, but continentally as well. He was an owner who you could feel truly cared about the success of the club, not just in it to profit as others do. In fact, he's loaned the club 1.5 billion that he hasn't asked for back, which we'll get to later. Anyway, you all know the history of Roman. Under him, Chelsea have won 21 trophies, including 5 Premier League titles in that stretch. They had been champions of England just once prior, in the 1950s. Besides the Cup Winners' Cup, their presence in Europe was relatively non-existent. Every international trophy, their 2 European Cups and 2 Europa League titles, came under Abramovich. In total, counting every single trophy, whether the competitions exist or not, whether it's a Community Shield or a Champions League title, the Abramovich era saw Chelsea win 21 of their 34 trophies, or 61% of their trophies. Important to note that the titles won under Abramovich were of a much grander scale as well. We're talking league titles, continental titles. So how did he elevate Chelsea, a club that was relegated twice as recently as the 80s, to this standard? Credit must be given to Abramovich for allowing the running of the club to fall in the hands of others. While he would be involved in and have a final say on things such as transfers, managerial sackings and appointments and the like, ultimately, much of the day-to-day operations fell to appointed individuals such as Bruce Buck and Marina Granovskaya. Where Abramovich comes in is the funding of the club. Over 2.3 billion euros has been spent on transfers since his takeover in 2003, as he became the first mega minted owner in the Premier League. But to reduce him to just a source of cash would be unfair and disingenuous, as Roman himself had a genuine interest in the decisions of the club. I mean, even recently, Buck has said that he speaks to Marina Granovskaya multiple times a day. But as of March 2nd, 2022, that all came crashing down as Abramovich released a statement saying that as of now, he will be selling the club. Quick snippet from his statement. I would like to address the speculation in media over the past few days in relation to my ownership of Chelsea FC. As I have stated before, I have always taken decisions with the club's best interests at heart. In the current situation, I have therefore taken the decision to sell the club, as I believe this is in the best interest of the club, the fans, the employees, as well as the club's sponsors and partners. The sale of the club will not be fast-tracked, but will follow due process. I will not be asking for any loans to be repaid. This has never been about business nor money for me, but about pure passion for the game and club. Moreover, I have instructed my team to set up a charitable foundation where all net proceeds from the sale will be donated. The foundation will be for the benefit of all victims of the war in Ukraine. This includes providing critical funds towards the urgent and immediate needs of victims, as well as supporting the long-term work of recovery. I think one of the keys to this statement is donating to the victims of the war in Ukraine is great, of course, first of all. But as far as potential buyers go, the fact that he is not asking for debt to be repaid to him is huge. Through his holding firm Fordstam Limited, which is the parent company of Chelsea, Abramovich has loaned around £1.5 billion to the club. By him taking the loss there and not demanding the repayments of said debts, the pool of prospective buyers opens up a bit, as they no longer would have to cover those debts or have them factored into the final figure when they're purchasing the club. They can just negotiate with Roman on the actual value of the club without taking those debts into mind. But let's start looking at his reasons for being under the microscope and ultimately deciding to sell Chelsea. Now, there had been some visa issues for Roman, hence why he has been seen so infrequently at Chelsea matches since 2018. But in the grand scheme of things, that didn't stop him from still contributing to the running and funding of the club. Like I said earlier, he was on the phone with Marina Granovskaya multiple times every day. So as for Roman, quite simply, most Russian oligarchs are under the microscope in England and around the world, really. I mean, the Everton-linked Alisher Usmanov being one who has been sanctioned, and thus Everton has been forced to cut ties with sponsors. But what about Abramovich? Why is there so much attention on him now, beyond just falling under the category of being a Russian oligarch? Well, actually, the fact that he is a Russian oligarch is exactly why there is so much attention on him. As said in the House of Commons on Wednesday, March 2nd, 2022, opposition party leader Sir Keir Starmer asked this of Boris Johnson, quote, Roman Abramovich is the owner of Chelsea Football Club and various other high-value assets in the United Kingdom. He is a person of interest to the Home Office because of his links to the Russian state and his public association with corrupt activity and practices. Last week, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson said Abramovich was facing sanctions. He later corrected the record to say he isn't. Well, why on earth isn't he? Johnson replied by saying it wouldn't be appropriate to comment on an individual case such as this at the moment. So with that in mind, what kind of, quote, corrupt activity and practices could Sir Starmer be referring to? I mean, there's plenty of hearsay, publications like the Daily Mail running stories. You can look into those if you choose to. I'm not here to confirm or deny whether Roman Abramovich has ties to some unsavory business. But in the name of working with facts, what we know for sure, let's focus on why there's always been a spotlight on Abramovich, given his ties to the Kremlin in the past, and why oligarchs are getting targeted by governments in light of this war in Ukraine. And I'd say it's about time we make use of Manuel and all of that Soviet Union and Russian knowledge that he has regarding this situation.
He was close to the Yeltsin family, and he made this money in oil and gas during the privatization process in the Soviet Union and what then was the Russian Federation, the successor state, right?
In fact, just a quick interjection. According to this article from The Guardian from 17 years ago, the Yeltsin family had actually invited Roman Abramovich to stay in an apartment in the Kremlin in 1996. So his ties to Russian politics go back quite far and run close to the Russian state, despite him distancing himself from such later in life. Anyway, back to Manuel.
Vladimir Putin was introduced to Boris Yeltsin by Abramovich. Putin was at the time just working in the St. Petersburg city administration. He wasn't a big politician or anything. Of course, many people now point on the fact that he was a former KGB officer stationed in Dresden in Germany. That's why he speaks excellent German. They wanted to sort of hand it over to him. And there was a social contract made between the oligarchs and the Kremlin to say the oligarchs got to keep their money and got financial stability. But in turn, Vladimir Putin was going to get full political control. So yeah, he was one of the people involved in this for sure.
And you hear that word come up all the time, oligarch. You know, you first started hearing it when he first, or at least for a lot of football fans, they first started hearing it when these rich Russians got involved with the Premier League, etc. So effectively, what role do oligarchs play in Russian government in general, and how much influence politically do they have?
I always think of it as four pillars in the Russian Federation: the oligarchs, the army, secret service, and the people. And the oligarchs is certainly a strong pillar. They played a fundamental role of making this regime what it is today, right? And making money and sort of signing a social contract with the Kremlin to ensure that their money was safe. Although you could sort of tell that not all of them trusted necessarily what the Kremlin was going to do, right? Because they're all amazing assets abroad. Chelsea is a great example for that. With that in mind, I think some of the oligarchs, like Abramovich, who were a bit closer to the Kremlin, had a better relationship, because at some point he was also governor of a Far Eastern Oblast, right? Because of that, he had a bit of a closer relationship. At the same time, there's always this awareness that it's maybe good to have assets abroad, just in case you get on the wrong side of the Kremlin. That's the kind of role that they played. It's sort of like a give and take. It's like the providing financial means to the Kremlin for them to realize projects, or like to give security, financial security to the likes of Vladimir Putin, but at the same time also to sort of run the state and key businesses and key economic pieces. Banks and natural resources seems to be the big one for all of these oligarchs. And telecommunication, let's don't forget that as well, because you need that too. And that's where Usmanov with Everton, right? That's right. A big story that's developing at the moment. For him, it's also telecommunication.
Yes, absolutely. Alistair Usmanov, I can't remember what it's called, phone something.
Megaphone, yeah. Exactly. I noticed because like whenever I went to Russia, that's the company I used. So please don't sanction me.
So, the oligarchs control key resources and pieces of the Russian economy. Now you can see why countries are doing their best to sanction them in order to put pressure on Putin. You put pressure on the people who surround him, who help fund his moves, and you put pressure on him. With all of these things considered, it's just becoming too difficult for Abramovich to operate in England. The Home Office made it incredibly difficult for him to get a visa, which he gave up on. And while he could technically be in England for up to 6 months now, thanks to his Israeli citizenship, the likelihood of sanctions being put upon Abramovich makes his involvement in the club not make any practical sense, and a sale forced upon him. Sanctions would go as far as freezing Chelsea's bank accounts. That means that any payments from sponsors or cash influxes from Abramovich himself wouldn't reach Chelsea's accounts. And worse yet, for them, no money would be taken out of Chelsea's accounts, meaning the running of the club would have to be done without any money, without money for any and all employees of the club. Worse yet, Abramovich would not be able to sell the club either, leaving him with a frozen asset that would sit and rot while the government takes ownership of it. And the club itself, uncertain times would ensue, with the spooky word that is liquidation being thrown around. As recently as June 2021, Chelsea admitted that with all of their heavy losses thanks to the pandemic, they were, quote, reliant on Fordstam Limited for its continued financial support. Remember, Fordstam Limited being Abramovich's holding company that has, quote unquote, loaned the club plenty of money. With this in mind, coupled with the freezing of accounts, you can see why Abramovich had said that as of now, his sale of Chelsea is what is best for the club.
I mean, it's all really fascinating because we've never seen this before. And it's like, it's a really interesting case too, because we always kind of suspected that these assets were there to protect them from whatever could happen to them domestically at home. But now these assets is actually kind of backfiring, because like it's not protecting them from what's going on at home, because like what's going on back home is having an impact on the global economy, and the global economy is punishing these people abroad, the very place where they thought they were safe. That's actually really interesting, because all of a sudden your insurance policy in the UK, your football team that you own to protect you from the wrath of Vladimir Putin, poof, gone. Just like that. I mean, that's remarkable. Like, that's the kind of world that we're living in right now. That it's a very, very good tool to sanction too, because we know that Usmanov and Abramovich and all these guys have influence. They have the back channels. They can talk to Vladimir Putin. We're hitting the right people. It's a very effective tool in that regard.
And that is why you may have read that Abramovich, among other Russian billionaires around the world, are allegedly looking to pull out of the UK and the USA completely. Their real estate, their football clubs, in Abramovich's case, luxury boats moving to the Maldives, it's all for this reason, so it doesn't get seized. As far as handing the club over to the Supporters Trust, we haven't really spoken about that much because it was truly meaningless in practice. And as far as relevancy, it was just that, a single moment. The word stewardship, according to sports lawyer Stuart Hatcher, in speaking to The Athletic, has no legal meaning. Thus, this was just a symbolic attempt to perhaps get some heat off of Abramovich before ultimately opting to sell the club, being forced into it. I want to thank you for joining me for this video. I hope you learned something, and if you did, hey man, consider hitting that subscribe button. Remember, it's free. Beyond that, I appreciate your time. Shout out to my man Manuel for joining me, and the same goes to you as well. Take care, guys. Be safe.